Household brownies are complicated. They exhibit a kaleidoscope of emotions and values. Last Friday, I answered all your questions about these colourful fairy folk. So if you missed that one, you can go back and check it out. Hi, I'm Kitty. Welcome to Fairy Encounters. In today's video, I feature a series of curious true stories of household fairies, which will delight and possibly confuse you. The last one, in particular, shows the fierce determination and commitment that some brownies show to a family and a home. Before we begin, remember there are firm rules in keeping a brownie content, working, and harmless. Never, but never criticise them. Don't give them clothes or a name. Don't abstain from drinking. Oh, and it's probably best if you're not a member of the clergy. The first story comes from Ireland, where it's worth noting that there is often a crossover between the fairy known as the leprechaun and the household fairy known as a brownie. In County Cavan, there was a helpful fairy who regularly threshed the corn for a certain farmer. He would bring the corn into the barn, he threshed the corn, separating the grain from the husk, and when he was finished, he placed a flail on top of it. In the morning, the farmer would come out to the barn to find that the threshing was completed. This went on for many years with this particular farmer, and it was well known throughout the district. Then one morning, the farmer entered the barn as usual and found the little man laying dead under the straw. In days past, women spun all the wool they required in their own homes. A little fairy lady came frequently to our neighbour's house and spun all the wool that was left undone after the women of the house had gone to bed. On one occasion, in an effort to thank the fairy, the women left a cap and a cape for the little woman laid across the spinning wheel. On seeing these, the little woman was heard to sing, "Oh, Cho, a cap and a hood, and poor old Brownie will never do good." She then picked up the cap and the cape, left the house, and never returned. In Scotland, there was a particularly elusive brownie who would every night wash his feet in the nearby river before taking to the local farmhouse, and with his feet still wet, set about cleaning the dirty dishes which were left there. In return for this, he was always left a glass of milk, and although he was never seen, it was a happy arrangement for both the brownie and the family. Until, that is, one night when a man returning from market heard this brownie splashing about in the river and called out to him, "Well, Puddlefoot, how is it with you this night?" "Oh," the brownie cried out, "I've gotten a name. It's Puddlefoot he's called me." And with that, he vanished, never to be seen again. Here in Wales, they're known as boobar, and there's one particular thing sets them apart from brownies. They're agreeable enough. They help us with churning butter, carding wool, sweeping and keeping the fire, and they ask little in return. A bowl of cream, a bite to eat, or a cup of ale. But there are two things our boobar won't abide: teetotalers or clergy. I will tell you this as my grandfather told me. He was a child in the very house where it happened. There was a Baptist preacher in Cardiganshire who was fonder of his prayers than taking a drop of ale. Well, by and by, our family boobar took a dislike to him, and one evening, as the preacher kneeled down to solemn prayer in our house, the boobar jerked the stool out from under his elbows. Then he crushed fire irons on the hearth, which brought the dogs to howl. Then he grinned through the window, making the praying children fall into laughter. It continued the very next day. The boobar followed the preacher across a field and appeared before him as his exact likeness. The preacher stood frozen in place, looking at his own self, and fainted in fright. That very day, he packed up and left Cardiganshire in fury and fear. He never returned. And finally, a fascinating experience which shows us that not all household fairy help the family openly. In Wales, the household fairy often attaches itself to the home that it lives in rather than the family. But first, please show YouTube that you like this kind of content by becoming a member of my channel, subscribing, and liking my videos. It all helps. Thanks so much. When I was a kid, we moved into a house that was basically half old and half new. One half of our house is over 100 years old. It used to be a farmer's house. It was here before our town was even established. About 30 years ago, when the suburb was being developed, they didn't want to just tear the old half down since it was in such good shape, so they just tore one side off and added on to the house. So now we've got the old house and the rest of the house is just sort of slapped on to the side of it. The house is old. The land is old. There's a lot of history here. I'm the only person with a bedroom in the old half of the house. All the other bedrooms are in the new half. The very first night we were all sleeping in the new house, I woke up in the middle of the night. Now this was odd since I've always been a ridiculously heavy sleeper, even when I was little. But I just woke up and it was like someone had just put knowledge into my head. You know, I knew that there was something I had to do. I felt nervous though, so I grabbed my favourite stuffed animal, I loved it more than anything else in the world, and climbed out of bed. Everyone else was asleep in their beds, but I walked downstairs and then down into the basement. As I came down the steps of the basement, I saw several small balls of bright blue light that were moving around. There were about 10 of them, each about half the size of a football and about a foot off the floor. They were floating in the air, but it wasn't a light, easy floating. It felt like people standing at a meeting, maybe shifting around a bit or moving around to get to their spot, but it all felt very purposeful. I felt their attention on me, that they were watching me to see what I would do. They arranged themselves into a rough sort of half circle, leaving me access to the middle. I knew that they wanted some kind of token or offering or gift. It was like they expected me to give them something simply because of what they were, because of their importance. It was like the same way a king expects an emissary to bring a gift. They wanted something valuable and important to me. So I gave my beloved Plush one last hug and kiss. and carefully set her down in the middle of this half circle, which was about the middle of the room. As soon as I did that, it felt settled, like a contract had been signed. So I went up to my room and went back to sleep. And the next morning, before even my parents woke up, I went back downstairs to see what had happened, and my plush was gone. Throughout this experience, I didn't feel scared or happy or sad or anything, but sort of just matter of fact. It was just like, okay, this is what's happening, this is what I have to do. It felt very businesslike. I think I bought protection or something for our house because just in the time that we've lived here, let alone all the years before, there were times where, due to the harsh weather we get here, the house definitely should have flooded or at least lost power or even had the whole foundations crumble. I mean, something. But nothing. We've always been fine. This is especially odd because, according to the guy who inspected our house a couple of years ago when my parents were thinking about selling, the builder for the new side of the house did a dreadful job with subpar materials, and by all rights, that side of the house should be basically sliding down the hill and falling apart. But it's totally fine. And what's more, we've never had serious illness or injury in the house or on the property. No farm machinery mishaps or fire. Nothing has fallen over or broken, and we've never had animal attacks or bites or illness. I don't know if I'm just crazy, but I think whatever drew me to the basement that night has been looking after this house and the people in it for decades. Isn't that amazing? I really hope you've enjoyed these stories of household brownies. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious and be kind. Cheerio!